This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation, welcome back to another edition of the movie review of the day here on the Pop Experience. I am Steve Riddle, back again for another go-round, and today I am continuing my trek through the films of one Mr. Don Bluth. We are getting very close to the end here. We actually only have 3 films left, including the one I'm going to talk about today, so, it's been quite the journey, but, it is kind of sad that we're getting to the end here, and the film we'll be talking about today is one that I've actually... Prior to this, to me recording this, I had actually not seen before. I do remember it, seeing a lot of trailers for it on television when it first came out, and it's always one that I kind of wanted to go back and watch at some point. And now, thanks to this pod, I've had a chance to do so. And of course, this is the first film for Don under the banner of 20th Century Fox, because as you know, as we kind of talked about in the last few pods. His animation studio unfortunately went under, so he basically got bought out by 20th Century, who then formed their own studio called Fox Animation Studios, and this is the first film from that studio, and that film is Anastasia. Of course, was released on November 21st, 1997. Budget of $53 million. Box office $140 million. So actually quite a decent little success there. Starring Meg Ryan, John Cusack, Kelsey Grammer, Christopher Lloyd, Hank Azaria, Angela Lansbury, Bernadette Peters, Kirsten Dunst, Lacey Chabert, and among others. It is a retelling of the story of the Romanov princess Anastasia, who manages to escape the falling of her family at the hands of the Russian Revolution. During that, she suffers from amnesia and spends the next 10 years trying to figure out who she is when she runs into a pair of con men who look to use her to potentially secure some riches. So, as we usually do, I will go ahead and start off with the 3 things that worked and 3 things that didn't work. So 3 things that worked. Number 1, kind of this little interesting retelling of history in a way, of this alternate history where, for those that remember, of course, in 1916, the Russian Revolution had started when the Romanov family, who were the last Nicholas, who was the last Tsar of Russia, and his family were overthrown by the revolutionists, and that, of course, would lead to the rise of socialism and communism in Russia. It's eventually becoming the Soviet Union. Obviously, in the real life, the entire family was murdered as a result of it. But here you have Anastasia, who's based off the Grand Duchess Anastasia and Nikolaevna, the real life counterpart, and then you also have the Dowager Empress Marie, who also survived, and she's living in Paris, waiting for her granddaughter to return. And then you have Anastasia, who now, who when we first meet her as an adult, goes by Anya and does not remember her past, and kind of going throughout the film, seeing her kind of get those bits and pieces of her memories kind of brought back together until the very end, when she realizes that she indeed is the missing princess, and she's reunited with Marie. Was a pretty good story, because we go throughout the whole film, and Anya is trying to figure out who she is, because she thinks she has no family, that she has no past, and seeing her kind of come to this realization that not only does she have a family, but the fact that she's basically a member of royalty is definitely an interesting story that they tell. I know that some of the criticism against the film was kind of against that that retelling of history. But I mean, let's face it, you're not going to really tell a film about the Russian Revolution. We know how insane it was, and let's not forget too that this is also right in the middle of World War I going on. So the world was kind of in a real state of flux at that point. So to kind of give it this little I guess kind of reworking of history, I thought it actually was worked well for the film in essence. So number two, kind of concurrently with that, you have the story here of Dmitri, who we first meet as a boy in the palace. He's kind of a servant there, and he actually ends up helping Anastasia and Marie escape during when the palace is being overrun by the revolutionaries. And eventually he becomes grows older and becomes a con man, and he eventually he and Vlad, the former nobleman, tried to, their whole plan is basically to find an Anastasia lookalike so that they can then take her to Marie and get the reward of 10 million rubles, which at least I'm sure back then in the 1920s was a lot of money. And then they end up finding Anya, who at first they don't know is the princess, but then as she starts to regain her memories, he does the same as well, as he kind of remembers, that she was the one that he saved all those years ago, and seeing their relationship kind of go from being very hard-headed in a way to eventually them falling in love again is it's a tired true trope of films, but hey, sometimes those tropes work, and this is definitely one of them, because you get there's stuff about them, each of them at the beginning that they don't like about each other, but eventually they do end up realizing that they kind of they definitely need each other, because again, Anya only knows herself as this as just a regular girl. She doesn't remember herself as a princess, and to kind of be foisted back into that society, I think was definitely a culture shock for her, and she kind of didn't want to. She kind of realizes that maybe this is not the life I want, and I, want to be with Dmitri, and Marie kind of sees that as well, and she kind of almost kind of pushes Anastasia into, to taking that decision. So, again, I thought that was, again, really well done. And number three, the idea of Rasputin being this kind of mystic, because again, he was in a real person in real life. He was a influence for the Romanovs, but was then eventually exiled, and many people kind of see him as kind of the impetus for the downfall of the Romanovs. So to see him basically kind of sell his soul in essence to see the Romanovs killed, only to realize that that Anastasia survived, and he kind of make it his life's mission to finally fulfill that curse. So the Romanovs dying, is interesting. We don't see him that throughout the film that often. I mean, he's kind of at first kind of lurking in the shadows until the very end, when we see him kind of come to the surface again to in essence finish the job, and he's definitely one of those more creepier villains that's I think doesn't get talked about enough. So so there is that as well. And now for the three things that didn't work. Number one, it is kind of weird making this, a musical film. There's certain films that, we have that, that work as musicals, and then there's some that don't. And, obviously, this is one of those ones where you could probably argue it maybe should have not have been a musical bit given the subject matter. But again, if you're doing if they were doing this, word for word on the actual story of, Anastasia and the Russian Revolution, that sort of thing, it definitely would not have been a musical. And I actually didn't know this, but there was actually a couple of years ago in 2016 a stage adaptation of this film made. So it's one that kind of again fell under the radar. So it's just one of those things where maybe I mean, can't say it didn't work. It didn't fully bomb as a musical because it did get nominated for Best Original Song at the Academy Awards. So there is that, but I don't know, just kind of weird again to see a film like this with such with such serious subject matter to have to end up being being into a musical. I think is kind of I don't know, just kind of a little bit off-putting for so, I mean, especially at that time when Disney was putting out fantastic musical movies. So we always I've always kind of mentioned a couple times how it seemed like Bluth still kind of took some of the tropes, the stuff that he learned at Disney, and brought them into his films. And this again was definitely one of them, the musical movies. So number 2, I feel like we didn't get enough of Bartok, the sidekick of Rasputin. We see him a little, throughout the course of the film, mainly as with whenever Rasputin's coming up with these ideas, and he's obviously he was there to kind of be the comic relief, but I feel like we kind of, I don't think he's one of those characters where it's like you don't want to overdo it with him. And I think that it was, the way they, kind of used him throughout this film was fine. We'll see when we get to the next film if maybe, if he, they went a little overboard with it. But even still, I thought we could have used a little bit more from him, in my opinion. Again, kind of a minor note, but again, just something I was thinking about. And then number 3, I do feel bad for Bluth because even though this film did do pretty well in terms of the box office, I feel like that Fox Animation Studios was already working on a loss because, as we'll see, we only get 2 more films after this, and then they eventually go belly up as well, and it's unfortunate because I know that they did have a couple of films. They were just, had a few films that they had distributed prior to this. Ferngully, Once Upon a Forest, and The Pagemaster, kind of the big ones. And I feel like that, they weren't given enough of, really enough of a, big chance to succeed. So we'll talk about it when we get to the next film. But, I think the writing was on the wall, unfortunately, for Don and his time as a director. So, but like I said, we'll get there with our next film. Now we'll go ahead and do my awards. My MVP of the film. This might be kind of weird, but I'm actually going to go with Liz Callaway, who provided the singing voice for Anya, and I thought she was really, really good in the songs she sang. Even though they kind of say that, having this be a musical, I thought was kind of off-putting. I thought she really did a great job in projecting. Like she definitely reminded me a lot of Jodie Benson as Ariel, and you can definitely you could definitely tell that she kind of took some inspiration from her, and maybe some of the other like Disney princesses that we've seen prior to this, and I thought she was really good in her singing of Anastasia. Not that I'm sure if Meg Ryan was actually probably could have, would have tried, but I think they did the right thing in getting an actual singer to the singing voice, because they do it also for when we see her in the beginning, when we see Anastasia in the beginning as a young girl. They have Kirsten Dunst do her speaking voice, and then they have Lacey Chabert, who of course one of the from Party of Five, and also as a big time voice actress, do the singing voice for her. So I usually don't call out like singing voices, but I wanted to again give Liz Callaway some love here. My favorite character in the film, I think it would have to be Vlad. He's kind of even though Bartok was kind of supposed to be the comic relief, I thought Vlad. He was kind of always the voice of reason between Anya and Dimitri, and a lot of that again is Kelsey Grammer is great voice actor, and he does a good job in making kind of having Vlad be the voice of reason there, and So I did want to see that. My least favorite character, I actually think I'd have to go Dimitri, because he is a bit of a jerk throughout most of the film, particularly to Anya. He does get his little turn there at the end where he declines the money, and because he realizes that he's in love with her. So but still, I think it's just kind of he's just kind of one of those meh kind of characters. My favorite scene, I think we're gonna have to go, and let's go hand in hand with my my favorite song from the film, and that is when Anna sings. I believe it's. It was once upon a December, and she's in the palace, or what remains of the palace, and she has those moments where she's like envisioning all the people dancing, and that sort of scene. I thought that was actually really well animated, and again, coupled with Calloway's performance of Once Upon a December, I thought was really, really well done. And so that would definitely be my favorite scene and favorite song of the film. And then final grade. This was definitely a major step up from our last couple of films. I mean, we had that little that kind of triple threat of Thumbelina, Troll in Central Park, and The Pebble and the Penguin, where it just felt definitely kind of mailed in. But you could tell this one they really took their time and really crafted it and perfected it. And obviously, a lot of that has to go to the fact that Fox Animation was, I think, really trying to make a good first impression. So. It's not as good as Blue's earlier films, I will just say that, but it's definitely there. It's better than his most recent work, so I'm actually going to kind of go split in the middle and give it 7.5 out of 10. So, I will. I'll give it that grade, which currently has it in the, like I said, right up kind of smack dab in the middle. Like I said, when we get to our next, we'll see what happens when we get to our last film, how things kind of end up. But I think this was, again, a really good film, kind of an underrated film, one that doesn't get talked about enough, and definitely one if you want to, if you do want to seek it out. It is actually on Disney Plus, so if you want to watch it, that's a great place to do it. So. So yeah, 7.5 out of 10 for me. Really, really good film, and definitely good. Like I said, a bounce back there for Don Bluth, albeit as minor as it is. Like I said, when we get to our next film, we'll get more into more detail about it. But that's going to do it for me for this episode. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for continuing to support us as we continue to grow this pod. I know we got some. Good theme weeks coming up here. And of course, since we are in the midst of summer, we got the big summer blockbusters of 2026 to talk about. So continue to listen for those. And also, again, if you're on the PTB Facebook group, the greatest SummerSlam match of all time tournament is still ongoing. Be sure to get in there and vote if you have it. We got some really fun matchups coming up and some that have already happened. So we appreciate all the love and support you give us for that as well. But with that, I am Steve Riddle. This has been the movie review of the day here on the Pop Experience, and we'll see you next time.
Somewhere down this road, I know someone's waiting. Years of dreams just can't be